Hi everyone, Lee here. Before we jump into today's episode with Sam from Elite Funeral Services, I just wanted to touch on a subject that we discuss during our podcast. Between the minutes of 28 and 33, we do briefly discuss the use of cold cots and infant death. So obviously if you are someone that's navigating that particular type of loss at the moment, please obviously feel free to navigate through the episode. Again, that's between minutes 28 and 33. I just wanted to put that out there just because it is obviously a delicate subject. Other than that, please let's jump into the episode and enjoy. Welcome to Tameside Bossing It. Today I am joined in the office by Sam Aspin from Elite Funerals.
Hello.
Welcome, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming onto my podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So we've been to our networking meeting this morning. So we're all coffeed and fueled up, ready for the day. So we're on episode 4 now.
Okay.
So I've done 3 others, which hopefully they are doing quite well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep to the same format, which is all I want you to do is talk to me about, so we're going to leave Elite Funeral Care for now. I'm going to go all the way back to when you left school.
Okay.
And you're going to talk to me about your career path from leaving school, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So over to you.
So very different to what I do now. When I first left school, I was an office junior on a YTS placement. So that was the norm back then. Did that for 12 months and I was like, yeah, this is not for me. So I then left that and went into care.
Okay. Why was the placement not for you? What was wrong with it?
I think it was just, there was nothing wrong with it. It just sitting in an office all day just didn't really gel with what I thought I wanted to do at the time. So I moved into care, elderly care within a nursing home.
Yeah.
How
old are you at this point?
18.
Okay.
Very quickly realised that was a calling in itself, supporting other people, looking after people. Really enjoyed it. Felt like you got a lot of satisfaction from it. Worked shifts. So did mornings, nights, evenings, long hours. And then moved into a role supporting learning disabilities.
Okay.
So people with profound learning disabilities living within the community. Okay. Absolutely love that job.
And where is this based?
So I was based in Hyde under that position. Really enjoyed it, really enjoyed the social inclusion aspect of it, getting people out into the community. Very quickly become aware that a lot of people don't understand learning difficulties. I remember being out with someone in a wheelchair who was very vocal because of their condition and having this feeling of everybody looking at me, something that I'd not really noticed prior to working in that service. So I worked in care for a long time. I was very lucky. I become a house manager within that business, within that company. That allowed me to do a qualification at the time that was called the RMA, the Registered Managers Award.
Okay.
It's got a different name now. But at the time, that qualification had a unit that was equivalent to what is now known as the TACA Award. So the A1 Assessors Award. So I did that unit and became an assessor in health and social care. So then I moved to a training company, supported a lot of different learners through their health and social care qualifications, level 2, level 3. Really enjoyed doing that. I got to travel around. I got to see lots of different care environments.
So, sorry, is this with the same company or a different?
No, I moved companies. So
how old are we?
Training provider, probably about 25 at that
point.
Okay.
So you were with the first company for a number of years?
I worked in care for a number of years, probably moved about a little bit to different companies, but predominantly with learning disabilities. So started working as an assessor, went back to college, did a foundation degree in education.
How did you find going back to college?
I enjoyed it because I was obviously an adult learner, so very different to obviously when you're in school, etc. So I went back to college one night a week, did a foundation degree. That took me 2 years. Then I topped up, did another year to a degree. And then I did another year with the Huddersfield University and topped up to an honours degree in education and training. So at the same time, I also progressed within the company I was working at. So I became an IQA, so an internal quality assurer, moved up in one company to a quality manager. But personally, in my life, I was also still doing some CPD around care. So I did a course about dementia, did a course about Parkinson's. So I was learning about all different conditions. So that really helped my training role because I could support learners that were dealing with them conditions. In 2010, my brother died really suddenly. He was only 28. And I remember I was in Leamington Spa at a meeting for the training company that I worked at. I got a phone call. Anthony's died, and I just couldn't believe it. So me and my
sudden,
very sudden, yeah, he just got up and come downstairs, said he didn't feel well and collapsed. By the time he got to the hospital, he was dead. So me and Anthony were very close. There was only like 18 months between us.
Right.
And that was just devastating, absolutely devastating, especially because nobody knew why at the time. So I got back from Leamington Spa, went to the hospital, like saw him. And my family had a really poor experience with the funeral director.
Right.
It was a funeral director that my mum had used previously for my gran and my granddad. Unbeknownst to my mum, somebody had bought the business, so it wasn't the same people. We just had a really bad experience. And obviously trying to pull the money together for a funeral when it's so sudden like that. And my brother was 28, he didn't have a will, he didn't have estates or anything like that. I saw my family really go through a lot of pressure. So that piqued my interest in funeral work, but I never pursued it.
Right.
So I carried on doing what I was doing, working as a training officer. And then my auntie became ill. She got cancer. She had lung cancer. That became terminal cancer. Now, my auntie worked at a business called Parkcake Bakeries. Everybody knows Parkcake.
Everybody knows Parkcake.
Been there since she was 15. Worked there for a long time, a very long time. And when she passed away, they rung my mum and said, we need Elaine's next of kin to come in. So she'd done a will. I was down as next of kin, executive, everything like that. So I went up, and my Auntie Elaine was on a very, very old contract where she was entitled, or her next of kin was entitled, to a death in service award. Now, you don't hear that much now.
No.
So I went up and I was like, I thought they wanted a keys or something. So I took all her stuff in, and there was like, oh no, we need to talk to you about this death in service award. Your Auntie Elaine has named you. So I was very lucky that I got a significant amount of money when she passed away. So with that, I decided to set up my own care agency.
Right.
So I did that, set up my own home care domiciliary agency called Elite Care Services.
Yeah.
So the Elite, the EL, stood for my Auntie Elaine's name. She was called Elaine.
Okay.
And I had that company for 12 years. So that's what I was previously a member of BNI in Masters with.
Right. And sorry, what age are we at the moment?
Oh, I was probably about 33, 34.
Okay.
Something like that.
So this is the time since your brother passed away. So we're on around 5 years then.
Yeah, it was about 5 years after I had passed away. So I set up the care company. We delivered all our own in-house training. I had someone that run it with me. And that business went for 13 years. And we didn't have any council contracts. It was all private clients that we had. And throughout the time of having Elite Care Services, my dad got diagnosed with cancer, passed away. Then my mum had a stroke and developed dementia from that before she passed away. So I looked after, or my carers within the company looked after my own mum and dad.
Yeah.
But then when my mum passed away, I sort of felt like the company didn't have a purpose anymore.
Right.
I'd sort of set it up knowing that at some point my own parents would require care. And there was a bit of me as well, when my auntie was ill, I really struggled to find a care company that had the appropriate training to support someone with terminal cancer. So all the carers that I had within the care company were all trained to an exceptional standard. We specialised in advanced dementia. We specialised in end of life. And that was through my own personal experiences, knowing what families looked for when they was looking for carers. So the care company was amazing. It was an amazing time in my life. And, you know, I'm very privileged that I got to look after a lot of people. But throughout that, I'd also been thinking, this company is going to close at some point because I haven't got the motivation anymore. And that's when I was like, I really want to go into funeral work, because by this time I'd obviously planned my dad's funeral, my mum's funeral, etc. So it's really important to point out that in all of my family funerals, so starting with my brother through to my auntie, and then an uncle passed away, and then obviously my dad, and then my mum, I had carried all of them coffins except for my brother's.
Right.
I'd also stood up and spoke at all of them funerals. And after the debacle of my brother's funeral, we'd found another funeral director that did all of them.
Right.
And she said to me, you stand up and you speak really well at funerals. Well, yes, I'm a trained teacher, so I can stand up and speak. And she said, you should train as a celebrant. So I thought, that's a really good idea. So I did. I trained as a celebrant, and then very quickly realised, actually, I don't want to do this. I only stood up and spoke at funerals because it was my family.
Yeah.
So then I was like, I really want to work in funerals, but I don't know how to get into it. And a lot of people say that to me now, they don't know how to get into the funeral service.
Okay.
And it's difficult because a lot of funeral directors are generational. And what I mean by that is they're passed down from family to family to family.
Yeah.
So unless you're going to start working for one of the corporations, one of the big three, it can be difficult to get into the funeral services. I was very lucky. The funeral director that did my mum, my dad's funeral, etc., she'd seen me carry coffins, and she had an all-female team. And she texted me one day and said, do you know anyone that might want a bit of ad hoc work carrying coffins? So straight away I was like, yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, great. I knew you were going to say that. That's great. So I did a lot of work for her, just doing bearing duties, supporting on funerals. And that was when I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. So
why? Where did that
passion
for that come from, do you think?
I think it was a lot to do with the way that funeral director had made my family or me feel during the process of planning my family funerals. It was so important, and I wanted to be able to give that to other people.
Right.
But also bearing in mind the situation of my brother's funeral, which wasn't great. It was the wanting to make sure no other family went through that as well.
Okay.
So I started doing some bearing work for her. At the same time, got accepted onto a course in Blackpool for embalming.
Okay.
A really prestigious course. About 30 people apply at a time. They only accept 10. So I was so happy to get onto that course.
So just for anybody that listening, I think most people will know what embalming is, but if they don't, are you comfortable explaining that?
Yeah, and embalming is a process where it's an invasive process. So it's basically, in layman's terms, removing all of the blood from in a body and replacing it with a chemical that helps preservation.
Okay. And what is the purpose of that?
There's 3 purposes. One is for presentation. It can help people to look better.
Yeah.
Preservation, people last a bit longer and are more viewable for a little bit longer. So a lot of people will promote embalming in situations where maybe you've got family that needs to come from another country before the funeral. And then the third purpose is a disinfectant. It will remove any risks.
Right.
Missold a lot. A lot of funeral directors say you have to have it, but you don't.
So this is what I was going to come on to. So obviously, I think we touched on this, didn't we, a couple of months ago? So as you're aware, my dad passed away in February from a really, really short cancer battle. And they'd sort of said, you really should probably get him embalmed because it's going to be 3 weeks. And at the time, my sister and my mum were doing a lot of the sorting out of that, and they opted to have that done. And then we spoke, didn't we? And I said that, 3 weeks, and you sort of pointed out that it was probably unnecessary and it was just an additional cost.
Potentially. So me and Joe, so when I set up the funeral company, I'd become friends with Jo. She was a funeral director at an independent. It got bought by a corporate. She said, I'm not working for a corporate, and she left.
Right.
So I met Jo, we become friends, and she was like, I really want to set up on my own, but I haven't got the funds. So we joined forces and set up Elite Funeral Services. So me and Jo very rarely embalm, even though I'm a qualified embalmer.
Yeah.
The thing is, if you've got good mortuary practice, then you don't always need to embalm.
Right.
But there is a lot of factors to consider. So the reason why the person died is a factor. So some people that pass away from a long illness of cancer, it might be beneficial in that case.
Right.
Okay, especially if there's been a lot of weight loss. if somebody has had a traumatic injury, embalming can assist with that. What the issue is, a lot of funeral directors will sell it as a sanitation process, and that is where you're not being transparent.
Right. Okay. Okay. So, sorry, we digressed a little bit. So back to your qualification in Blackpool.
Yeah, so I did 3 years training to be an embalmer, registered with the British Institute of Embalmers.
Yep.
Finished that. And by that time, I'd set up Elite with Joe. So, like I say, I met Joe and we decided to set up on our own. I slowly closed down the care company. So I did that when a client passed away or a client went into full-time residential or nursing care. We just didn't replace them.
Right.
So we dwindled the clients down and set up Elite.
Was that something that you wanted to do deliberately, or is it not? Did you not want to maybe carry on doing both at the same time?
I was a bit worried about a bit of a conflict. I was a bit worried that people might think, oh, you're looking after my mum, and then,
I guess I could understand that, yeah.
Although I will say, I have had a lot of clients that I looked after, their family come to me for the funeral, and I think that's really nice. It's never expected. So, for example, a lady rang me up and said, has passed away. And I said, please, will you let me know when the funeral is? And she was like, well, won't you let me know? Because aren't you going to do it? And I was like, oh, of course I will. But, you don't want to assume. So it is nice when we get to care for somebody that was cared for on the care company, because it's like that constant care. It makes it a bit difficult because obviously you know the person. But it is nice for the family because it's a consistency of care. So it's a real honour when that happens.
I mean, we call that, so in a state agency, for instance, if we do a full service, so like taking an investor on, finding a property for them, and then either doing the works and flipping it, or doing the works and then letting it out. So we call it a turnkey service. It's what we offer. I suppose it's a similar sort of thing.
It is. And like I say, it's lovely to look after somebody that you personally know. It does make the job a little bit harder, but it is that consistency for the family. So it was deliberate that I shut down the care company. My motivation had my passion for it had gone.
Okay.
It was getting harder in that service because we didn't have any council contracts. It was all private clients, so it was definitely getting harder.
What year are we in at this point?
I set up Elite in 2023.
Okay, so we're after COVID.
Oh yeah.
So you were doing the care providing during COVID?
Yes.
So what was that like?
Awful.
Okay.
So we were frontline carers, so we was key workers. It didn't stop for us. Nothing changed. The only thing that changed was that we tried to make sure it was consistent carers with one client to stop that different carers going in. But that was something we did anyway. That was one of the unique selling points for our care company. You had only 2 or 3 carers that would come to see you. It wasn't a different carer every day. But yeah, it was difficult during COVID.
So I've just recently, as you know, been off for a few weeks. I've had a hernia operation. So while I've been sat at home, bored out of my mind, I've been trying to find things to watch. And then, do you know who Stephen Graham is?
Yes.
So I have got a bit of a one-sided love affair going on with Stephen Graham. So I've been watching some of the stuff that he's done, and I came across a program or a film, not a short film really, it was a film on Channel 4. I'd never seen it, I'd never heard of it, but it was called Help. Okay. And it stars Stephen Graham and her name escapes me, she's a lady in Killing Eve. And theirs was about frontline care workers working in a care home. Stephen Graham played an adult with a young dementia, and she was one of the carers in the nursing home, but it was literally just as COVID happened, and the story is based around how they were in the care home during COVID and the fact that they didn't get any support. And there was one scene that I remember, and they'd brought someone, or somebody had gone to pick up somebody that had passed away in the care home, and when they came to collect the body, they've got like masks on and all that sort of stuff, and they got there and they were like, well, why are you guys not wearing masks? And they were like, because nobody's supplied us with any, nobody's told us anything, nobody's communicating with us or anything. And I was like, that must have been horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, I've not seen that, but it sounds like it's a good watch. But I mean, care providers were provided with free PPE. We had to order it. I mean, we just had it delivered every month, more than we needed,
Right.
you know. lots more than we needed as a small business. So that wasn't managed very well.
But then there was others that didn't receive anything.
Yeah.
It was very poorly managed, but
it was.
anyway.
And it was a difficult time to work in care.
Yeah.
And to be honest, following COVID, staff retention was really hard. Not the staff that I had, because a lot of my carers were there for a long time. So Debbie, for example, she was with us right from the beginning. She was there till the day that I closed.
Okay.
And there was a few like that, especially long service people. But trying to recruit new staff, horrendous, because in the back of their minds, if there was to be another pandemic, carers didn't get furloughed. We was out working.
Yeah.
So I think after COVID, a lot of people that worked in care decided to change career, because there was put through that,
Yeah.
So trying to recruit staff was horrendous after COVID in the care service.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons why I made the decision to close, because I had some carers that were coming up to retirement, and it was just a battle.
So it sounds like it was perhaps a natural end to that.
It was a natural end.
Chapter.
And although at the time I was quite sad about it, it's been a long part of my life, it had obviously been set up to support my own parents and things like that. We'd won some awards. It was an amazing time of my life, but it did come to a natural end. And I will say that the pressure that comes with running a care service is immense. So even when I was on holiday and things like that, you're just constantly worried about the people that you're supporting.
Yeah, of course.
So it was a high pressure job as well. So when it did close, it did help in terms of my own stress levels and things like that. So yeah, I'll always be very grateful that I did that. But yeah, it was a natural end.
Okay. So we're on 2023. We're just starting out with Elite Funeral Services.
Yeah.
So talk to me about how that started. So you've met Jo. Jo worked at a previous.
She worked at an independent that had been took over by a corporate.
Are we allowed to mention the corporate?
Well, there's the big three.
Yeah.
Funeral Partners, Dignity Co-op. They're the big three. So what a lot of them, do is they'll buy independents.
Yeah.
And carry on trading under the independent name.
Yeah.
So a lot of people in the public don't realise that it's actually part of it, especially where they carry on. But if you know where to look, if you know to look for the little logo on the signage and things, then you'll know that it's part of the corporate. But that's what a lot of them do. They'll buy the little independents and carry on trading under the name.
So in terms of, because obviously it's very similar with a estate agency, you've got your small little independent estate agencies like myself, and then you've got the big boys. So in terms of funeral care, just tell me the differences between the two. What are the fundamental differences between a corporate and an independent?
Well, corporates are run as a business. Independents are as well, but you get a more in my opinion, and I must stress this is my opinion. You get a more personal service with an independent. Your big corporates, sometimes they upsell, the staff have targets, things like that. In a little independent, you rarely find that. So it's a personal touch, I feel. And like I say, that is just my opinion.
No, I completely agree. I mean, as I say, it's exactly the same with ours. I mean, my staff, my girls have targets and what have you, but it's not, KPIs and things like that corporates use, to kind of whip you into shape. They have full autonomy to, if they can't, not upsell, but, if they go to a client's house and the value of their houses or the amount that they can afford to pay, they've got full autonomy to change that and make that bespoke to fit the need of that client. Whereas I feel like the big boys and the corporates, they're not bothered. So they'll just, it's fine. It doesn't matter because it's a drop in the ocean to them.
And I think with some of the corporates, people don't realise that actually with an independent, when we bring your loved one into our care, they are with us. So in my funeral home, they come to us and they stay with us. With a corporate, that's not always the case. They have what are called care hubs. So your loved one might go to a care hub, which is essentially a warehouse with lots of other people.
Gosh.
The person will be washed, dressed, coffined, and then they'll be brought to that funeral home because they might not have the space for their own mortuary. And it's not cost viable for every single branch to have a mortuary. I'm not saying that's always the case, but it definitely is in some of them that I know about. So with an independent, your loved one should be with them all the time. Again, I'm sure there's independents that don't have their own mortuary space, so they might utilise storage with other places, with bigger funeral directors. But for us, we have our own mortuary space. So when we bring someone into care, they come to us and they stay with us until the day of the funeral.
So interestingly, with my dad, so my dad lived in Warrington, so we used a funeral care home in Warrington, and what they did, they had like a separate mortuary area, and then what we did was, when we told them that we were coming and that we wanted to view, what they did was they basically, because it was quite funny actually, on the day, me and my mum were there and we were like, so do you actually, oh no, I think it was my wife actually that came, and she was like, so do they roll them basically from here to there? Because they had like little chapels, tiny little chapels. There's like 4 of them, and they'd roll them and put them in, put my dad in there. And they were like, I was like, just ask her then, just ask her. It's like, so do you roll him out when you know that we're coming? She's like, yeah. So obviously everybody that's passed away, they're all basically in there, and then they're rolled out and put into there for viewing. But the one thing, and I think I mentioned this to you, didn't I? The one thing that I was really disappointed by is that there was no viewings at a weekend and no viewings after 5.
And who are they to say when you can come and see your loved one?
I know, and so that really, really peed me off to the point where I think that was when I was talking to you about, I was going to speak to my mum and my sister to see if we could then swap and bring him to you.
And it's little things like that.
Everything had been done by that point, but
it's little things like that. Independents will go out of the way to accommodate you. So, you know, we've had people come in the evening, at weekends, as long as you let us know, then we can accommodate that. Either me or Joe will go. And, you know, while you're in we call our chapels of rest guest rooms. So while you're in the guest room with your loved one, I'll just find some work to do. What I will say is, don't just turn up on the weekend, because the chances are I'm not going to be there. You must let us know. But it's like charging. A lot of the big 3 and some independents will charge you to come and view your loved one out of hours. Absolutely not. You know, it's your loved one. Why would I charge you to come and see them? And I've never experienced this myself, but I have been told that some put a limit on how many times you can come. Again, who are we to say that, you know? So absolutely, or a time limit, absolutely not. What we do need to be mindful of is, if a funeral director has a few people they're caring for at the same time, then they might need to say, well, actually, I can't do that time. Could you come? If they're accommodating another family as well.
Of course.
But it's about the way that's, you know, put across. But for us, you can come whenever you want to come.
No, it really was. It was a sticking point for me, that it really annoyed me.
Especially if you work.
So, which I do. My wife's a school teacher. You know,
and she works during office hours.
And she works in a PRU as well. So, although the kids finish at 3, 3:15, because it's a PRU, they generally have a lot of paperwork to do afterwards and things like that. So, you know, I took another part of the day off. You know, Becca, my wife, she took part of the day off so that we could. Again, it's in Warrington, so it's not exactly round the corner. So we had to, you know, travel up and go. So yeah, it was inconvenient. I mean, to the point that you said there about, you know, being charged, they didn't even offer that as an option, because I probably would have, unfortunately, considered that, because it would have been more convenient for me to go at 7 in the evening, you know, than it was to go at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I probably would have paid it if they actually even offered it, but they didn't even offer that, to be fair.
So funeral directors, they should have what's called a standardised price list. And if they are going to charge for viewing, as it's called, it should be documented on the standardised price list. Absolutely.
Okay. So, how long has this been settled then now? Since 2023?
2023. So it was a slow starter.
Yeah.
Very slow. Me and Joe spent a long time. We looked at lots of properties, and none of them felt right.
Right.
The reason for that, our funeral home is quite, I want to say, unique in that we have 2 resting rooms, guest rooms, one of them being a nursery set up for baby loss.
Gosh.
So a lot of the places that we looked at just didn't have the room for that. Or if they did have the room, they just wasn't in the right location. Or there was something. Anyway, the location that we are in was a funeral director. It was another company a few years ago. And I was a little bit, do I really want to take over where someone was? Because you get tarnished with, you know, it's just someone that's reset up under another name. But the opportunity to have the baby chapel was just, it was there. The space was good. The rent was reasonable. So we decided to take that risk. And it paid off. We just did a lot of work with our branding to make sure people knew we was not just, the same company under another name.
Yeah.
And it paid off. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have 2 resting rooms. One is, like I say, a nursery setup. It's got a cold cot that was very kindly donated to us by a charity called Little Acorns.
And what's that?
Little Acorns.
No,
the cold cot.
Yeah.
So it's a machine that attaches to a cot, or it has its own Moses basket that you can use as well. And you plug it in, you put water in it, and it will literally force cold air into the cot.
Right.
So it means that baby can stay in there instead of going into a mortuary fridge.
Gosh.
It means that families can spend time with baby. They can take it home if they want baby to come home. So hospital setups normally have them on lost suites. They're very expensive. Ours was donated by Little Acorns, which was a lovely lady and her partner who lost baby Oakley. So they did some fundraising to be able to donate a cold cot and chose us to do that, which was amazing. So we support their fundraising efforts all the time. She's actually fundraising now to do another one for another. It's not a funeral director. I think she wants to donate one to a local hospital.
Right.
So we're always putting her stuff on our social media. But just having that cold cot means that parents can spend time with baby. Whereas because babies decompose at a quicker rate.
Okay.
So the cold cot gives families time. So it's really important to have that so that we can offer our families time with their little one. Like I said, they can take it home if they want to.
I mean, I genuinely couldn't think of anything worse than that. I've got, me and my wife have got some very close friends that I won't name because they don't know I'm necessarily talking about it, but they lost their baby not too long ago. And just from, what they've said, I just can't imagine the pain and I just can't imagine anything worse than that, to be honest.
So me and Joe in the past have both suffered baby loss, which is why we was so adamant that we wanted a space that allowed us to do this. So when we did our nursery setup, we were the first and the only funeral directors in Tameside to have it. There is another funeral director now that has a similar setup.
Right.
So it's really nice to see somebody else that has been inspired by the fact that we did that and that their families will now get offered that. I'm not saying that every funeral director should have it because it is an investment. However, the fact that we've got that just makes us a little bit different in what we can offer. We have had families that have come to us that have said, I've come to you specifically because of this, because of the baby room, which is amazing, So yeah, it's just a really nice thing that we can offer to families.
Okay. And so how I don't know whether this is the right question to ask or how to ask it. How busy are you now? That was a silly question to ask, isn't it?
It's like buses, and I say that not in a derogatory way at all, but we might be quiet for like 3 weeks and then all of a sudden phone call. And that is usually the way. And it would be really nice if it was just really consistent. But unfortunately, death is not consistent.
Yeah.
So at the moment, we're quiet.
Okay.
But 2 weeks ago, we had 4 funerals that we was working on. So it really is just a case of taking it day by day.
Okay. And so what I'd like you to do now, Sam, if you can. So obviously, mentioned my dad passed away. He was at home for a very short time, and then we managed to get him moved to a hospice. We moved to the hospice around the lunchtime on I can't even remember the days now, but we moved it around lunchtime on that day, and he died the following day. So he was literally in the hospice for just over 24 hours. And then we kind of got told you can stay with him for as long as you want, and then we left. And then as far as we were concerned, we had to let the hospice know what funeral directors that we were using, and then they were going to go and pick him up. So can you talk us through that process from picking up our loved one at a hospice, at home, or at the hospital, and then what that process is all the way to funeral?
Yeah, well, it does vary on where someone has passed away. So if someone's passed away in a hospice, we will get a phone call when the doctor or the nurse practitioner has certified that death. and then we can go and bring your loved one into care. So we will go, get your loved one, bring them back to our funeral home. In the case of a hospice, the death hasn't been registered just then. So we're not actually allowed to do anything with that person until the death has been registered, just in case coroner wants to be involved. Highly unlikely if it's a hospice death, but you just never know. So that person would be put into our mortuary setting, which is obviously a cold room, and they would be covered up. We would book them into our mortuary register, make sure they've got an ID bracelet on, make sure that they've got the possessions with them, and then I would ring the family and say, Dad's now with us or Mum's now with us. What would happen then is the family would need to go and register the death. Once they've registered the death, the registrar will send us what we know as the green. So that is the certificate for burial or cremation. Once we've got that green, we can then start making arrangements. So we would meet with family. We'd probably meet with family before the registration was done, and start discussing what sort of funeral they would like, whether it be cremation, a burial, and we'd start making the arrangements. Once we've got that green, we can then start to get mum or dad ready. So we could dress them, we could put them in a coffin once we've ordered that, and then viewings could take place.
So yeah, so you mentioned there that until that green comes through, that you can't touch them or anything, can you? So when my dad passed away and we had to go and register the death, I think we did it a couple of days later, and we rang up and said, can we come and see him? And they were like, not really, because we can't prepare him or anything like that. So I think essentially he looked exactly the same as he left the hospice.
Yeah. So that doesn't mean that we don't care for the person in care.
No.
So we'd still go in and check that person every day. We may apply Vaseline to the lips if the lips are drying out. We may make sure that their eyes are closed.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't do anything invasive. So we wouldn't apply eye caps or anything like that, just in case the coroner wanted to. The coroner needs to give us clearance.
Right.
And green does that.
Okay.
In the case of a home death, same thing. However, if someone passes away in a hospital, we can't actually go, in most cases, we can't actually go and pick that person up from the hospital until we've got the green.
Right, okay.
The hospital will not release them to us without the green.
What, is there a reason for that?
They want to make sure coroner's not going to be involved. Right. Because if we went and picked someone up from the hospital and then the coroner said, actually, yes, I'm going to order it.
You've got to take them back, sort of thing.
We'd have to take them back. So the hospital will not release someone to us in most cases without the green.
Okay.
And that is just like a safeguard in case coroner wants involvement. So if it's a hospital death, then we would wait for the green and then we would do exactly the same thing, but we'd go to the hospital. Depending on which hospital, we might need to make an appointment to do that. So Christie's, for example, we have to have an appointment before we can go and bring anyone into care.
Right.
A lot of hospitals sort of shut for lunch, so there's certain times you can't go, and we would just plan that in our diary. Again, we would let family know, been and brought dad into care today. And we say into care, we don't say been and collected your dad or anything like that. Yeah. We say into care. So our language is very different to the corporates. That's another thing with the corporates. Their language might be very different. So we don't use the word deceased. Right. We say your person or your dad or Mike. We'd use the person's name, because deceased is quite cold. Although you have to go off a family. Some families, they might prefer you to refer to their dad as dad's body. You have to be led by the family on that. But where possible, we use the person's name.
Okay. Yeah. And so you've got the green, you've started preparing them. Yeah. And then in terms of, do you use a specific church or do the family decide? Yep. I mean, we decided, so we were obviously my dad was in Warrington, but the majority of my family are in Southern Cemetery. Mm-hmm. So we obviously had to arrange to go to Southern in one of the chapels there. So how does that fit in? Because that was a bit tricky because of how busy Southern Cemetery was. So how does that fit into?
So families normally have an idea, hopefully, of what sort of service they want, whether that be a cremation or a burial. What a lot of people don't know is that there is no legal requirements in terms of a funeral. The only legal requirement is that the body is either buried or cremated.
Right.
So people will say, right, I want to go to Duckingfield Crematorium because that's the norm. That's what I did with my dad. That's what I did with my mum because I didn't know there was other options. You can have a funeral service wherever you want. You can have it in your home. You could have it in your local pub as long as they're happy for you to have it there. You know, there is no stipulation that you have to go to a church or you have to go to a crematorium.
Right.
And one of mine and Joe's main sort of missions is to make people aware that actually there is choices. So there's some really good funeral directors across the UK that do this. There's a lady down in London, and she holds funerals on canal barges that go around the Thames. You can have a funeral wherever you want as long as, you know, the people that own that place is happy for you to do
Yeah.
that. So you're not tied to go to a crematorium and have a 30-minute service or to go to a church. But generally, that's what people opt to do. So that would all be discussed within an arrangement. So we would ask family, we say, tell me what you think this funeral will look like, or what do you envisage for this funeral? So it's very family led. We don't lead them with, are you going to Ducklandfield Crematorium, for example?
Yeah.
We will see what they want to do, what they have an idea around, and we'll work with them to try and make that work.
Okay. And then in terms of the facilities that then you have, do you have, how many cars do you have?
We don't have our own fleet. We don't have our own cars, so we hire in.
Right.
So some funeral directors will have their own hearse limos. We don't. We're still relatively new,
Okay.
relatively small. So we hire in from a carriage master.
Right.
The great thing about that is that I don't have to pay the tax, the insurance, the MOT. I don't have to clean the cars.
Yeah.
And when the cars come into us, they come with drivers.
Right.
So that's 2 extra pair of hands. If we've got a hearse and a limo, that's 2 extra pair of hands for us on the day. So we hire our cars in. Not saying that will always be the case. It might be in the future that we purchase a hearse.
Yeah.
Who knows? My biggest reason for not having our own fleet at the moment is storage, where we would put them.
Okay.
Because obviously I'd want to make sure there was somewhere safe
Yeah.
overnight, and not on an open car park. So at the moment we hire in, but like I say, that works for us. The cars are always pristine when they come. The staff are amazing. We usually get the same members of staff, so our staff team looks consistent to families. And we've never had a problem with hiring in. Hearse and limos can be very expensive. They can be expensive to maintain. So we made the choice to hire in, because obviously as a new business, you're trying to look where you can.
And so does that reduce the cost of the overall cost for a funeral with you?
It doesn't reduce it. I mean, we won an award last year for best low cost funeral provider. We actively challenge funeral poverty. So like I say, when my brother passed away, my family really struggled to get the money together to pay for that funeral. So we make sure our prices are very, very competitive. So if we talk about direct cremations, for example, there's been a massive upsurge in direct cremations, which is a whole new thread that I could talk about. But the national companies, Pure, things like that, I think there's a comparison on our Facebook page. I think Pure charge 1,695. We charge 995. So our costs are very low anyway.
Right.
If we had our own fleet of cars, it would probably go up a little bit, to be honest, because of the costs associated with having your own cars. So the fact that we hire in allows us to keep our prices so well.
So you just touched on Pure there. So obviously when my dad knew what was happening, he had a discussion with me and with my mum, and he was very much just do one of them. I'm not fussed. I'm not here. It doesn't bother me. And I'm like, no, but Dad, I said, you don't understand that. Yeah, it might be cheaper, but the problem with those, and correct me if I'm wrong, but basically what they do is they'll come and collect him, take him away, and then basically, for want of a better way of putting it, Amazon deliver him back in a box.
It's very impersonal, yeah. And I think what a lot of people don't understand with the online direct cremations is that it's not local. So your loved one can all the way down to Andover, where their crematorium is.
Yeah.
And it is a conveyor belt. They will have coffin after coffin after coffin lined up, waiting, you know, to go into the cremator. There's no personal touch with it or anything. Now, I understand a lot of people say, oh, just do that. I know people that say that. But what you have to ask is, why? Is it because they're worried about the cost? Because, like I say, we challenge funeral costs all the time, and it's not that much dearer to have a full service.
Yeah.
Is it because they don't want people to have the stress? the thing is, a funeral is not for the person that's died. It's for the person left behind.
Yes.
It's the first step on their grief recovery journey, and we saw that after COVID. We saw after COVID when people were not attending funerals, they struggled to deal with that loss.
Yeah.
The funeral is a ritual that allows us as grievers to say goodbye. So that funeral is not for the person that's died. It's for us. So it's okay them saying, I'll just, do that. I'm not bothered. It's okay that you're not bothered, but we are, because we will struggle with it.
And to be fair, that's exactly what I said to my dad.
Yeah.
Because that's why, and then we literally put our foot down and said, Dad, but it starts not happening.
And if you really, really, really want a direct cremation, fine. At the end of the day, if you're going to make your wishes known and your family are going to follow them, absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Instruct your local funeral director. Don't use one of these online corporates, because every independent funeral director will offer that service.
Right, okay.
So at least you're still getting that direct cremation service, but it's personal. Your loved one is local, not being took miles away. Also, local independents, we do a direct cremation. We still allow you to come in and spend time with your loved one.
Right.
We still dress your loved one. You don't get that with the big online providers, And we also offer an attended direct cremation where up to like 15 people could still come and have a very small service.
Oh, wow, okay.
For relatively a low cost.
Yeah.
It wouldn't include a celebrant. Someone in the family would need to stand up and say a poem or something, but you still get that little chance. It's a 15-minute service if you wanted that. So see what your local independent funeral director can do first.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's a really good shout, to be fair. I mean, we were really unsure. We just knew we didn't want to do it that way.
And we're never going to get away from direct cremations because it's here now and it's here to stay. But, there is alternatives. If that's definitely what you want, speak to your independent, your local funeral director and see what service they can offer you, because it will be 10 times better.
Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't know that local firms would do that still.
Yeah, majority will.
And then you say that it's only, 15 minutes, but I think we were only at Southern for half an hour or 40 minutes, I think it was.
So crematoriums are usually 30-minute services. There's some that offer 40 minutes. Duckingfield have just introduced a 40-minute slot.
Right.
They're trialing that on certain days. Other crematoriums, you can have what's called a double slot, an hour. So it really depends on the crematorium.
No, I'm sure ours was 40 minutes. And then we had, so I spoke, my mum spoke, my sister spoke, and then my mum, so my dad was into Vikings.
Okay.
And so my mum had this poem, it was a poem, a Viking poem, and my little boy's only 11, but she asked him if he wanted to go up and do it. I'll tell you something really quickly funny. So she asked if obviously he wants to go up, and Ethan was like, yeah, no, I'll do it. And then he was ready all day. He'd been practicing. He was practicing in the car on the way to the cemetery. And then we thought he was going to do it at the same time as the speeches, or do you call them speeches, or what, the readings?
The readings.
And we had a montage of photographs and stuff, and the song that we had playing was, Simon and, was it Paul Simon Garfunkel, Sound of Silence?
Okay. Yeah.
But it was done by Disturbed, so like a metal group called Disturbed did it, and it's absolutely fabulous. It's amazing. And so we had that playing with all of the photographs on of my dad and the family and all that sort of stuff. So everybody's at this point, tissues at their eyes and all that sort of stuff. And the celebrant stands up and says, at the end of this, right, Ethan, are you ready to come up and do yours?
Yeah,
and I was like,
timing.
That is the worst timing possible. So he tried to go up and he was so upset, bless him, he couldn't do it. So he came and sat back down, and then I think somebody else had gone up or something else. And then he was like, right, Dad, I can do it now. I can do it now. I can go up. And he went up and he did it, and he was absolutely brilliant. But,
yeah, it's all about timing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I mean, I have huge respect for anyone that stands up and speaks at a funeral. I stood up at my brother's, my dad's, my aunties, my uncles, my mum's, and it's difficult.
Yeah.
And most recently, I stood up and spoke at my best friend's funeral. That was really difficult. So my best friend had been diagnosed with cancer. Then she was told it was terminal, and within a couple of weeks she'd passed away. I obviously went and picked her up from Christie's. I looked after her, and people say that must be such an honour to look after your best friend in the run up to a funeral. Yes, absolutely, it was. I'd never have let anyone else look after her.
Yeah.
And people will say, oh, you could speak to her every day. Yes, I could. I went in there every day and spoke to her. But it made it that bit harder.
Yeah, I can imagine.
After the funeral. Because when someone comes and sees their loved one, they might just come once or twice. When I was going into work every single day, I was seeing my best friend and speaking to her. So on the day after a funeral, when I went in, that's completely gone then.
Yeah.
And I'd done it for 2 weeks. So it does make it more difficult. So looking after someone that is a personal friend or family member, having to close the coffin on that person, I carried my best friend into the chapel, and then I stood up and spoke. And I remember all the way there to the crematorium in the hearse thinking, you can't cry, you can't cry, you can't cry, it don't look professional. And that was my biggest fear, crying.
Right.
And then when I stood up to speak, I just cried.
Yeah.
And actually no one said, that looks dead unprofessional, because at the end of the day, we're only using.
But you were also there twofold as well, right? Which I'm sure everybody was aware.
Yeah. And I think the day that I don't get a bit emotional at a funeral is the day that I'll say, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore.
Right.
Because if you are very closed down, emotionless, probably it's not the role for you.
Yeah.
You need to have a little bit about you to see the pain that families are going through. But that day was hard for me with my best friend. It was really hard. And the amount of people that come up to me afterwards and said, I don't know how you do it, but you just do. You just do it. I had to take a few days off afterwards to obviously fill my own cup back up, as they say. But yeah, it's difficult when it's someone you know and it's someone you love. But anyone that can get up and speak, people say, oh, I can't do it. But in my experience, if you know you're going to do it, you go onto autopilot, and there's just something that makes you get up and do it. And then after that, it's like the switch goes off, and that's when your emotions kick in. So anyone that gets up and speaks, huge respect. It's not an easy thing to do.
No, it was tough. And, my mum did so well. My sister was amazing. And my little boy was just incredible. And then I went up as well. And I thought I did okay right up until the end. My dad was quite a bit. He was an old school kind of guy. So, my dad never told us that he loved us and stuff like that. It was, and my reading was very much about sort of like him and the way that he did it. So like, I think part of my reading was that, he didn't tell us that he loved us, but he did it he's shown us in the actions that he did.
Yeah.
So I used to go and play snooker with my dad and stuff like that. And I think part of my reading was that, he would tell us that he loved me in the stupid shots that he'd make and stuff like that, and the banter that we had around playing snooker and stuff like that. And so that mine was tough right up until and then at the end, that was when I nearly went, when I sort of told him that I loved him and stuff. But it is tough. And and I think we touched on this when we first met, and the fact that no one really talks about death, do they?
Don't. And that's another mission of mine and Joe's. So death is going to happen to us all, and talking about it won't make it come any quicker. Just like if you talk about sex, you're not going to get pregnant. I say that all the time, and people have this fear associated with death. And
why? Why do you think that is?
I don't know. It's a taboo subject in sex.
It is, but it's such a strange
it is
thing to be
if I
feared
pound for every time I talked about death, I wouldn't have to work, quite frankly. But it is a mission of mine and Joe's. We went to Willowwood last week on this death and dying event, and it's important, at the very least, if you only do one thing, let your loved ones know what you want.
Yeah.
Because the amount of times a family will sit with us and go, we've not talked about this. I don't know what my dad wanted. I've done it myself. When the only thing I knew what my mum wanted when she died was she wanted a wicker coffin.
Right.
That was completely known by accident. I went to a funeral. She said to me, how was the funeral? I said, oh, it was a wicker coffin. She said, I want one of them. That was it, And that had always just stuck with me. I'd never spoke to her. It's just that in my family, we've always had cremations. It's always been at Duckingfield, so I just followed what we always had.
Yeah.
But when I look back now and think, if I knew then what I know now, would have been very different. My dad's funeral would have been very different. My brother's funeral would have been very different. So just let people know what you want. Even if you just write it down, put it somewhere, fill in a wishes pack, whatever. You don't have to go out and buy a funeral plan. You don't have to do none of that. Just let someone know what you want. And that is something that me and Joe say all the time, because it's so important. My friend Mandy, she knew she was dying. She never told anyone what she wanted. And when I went to meet the family, they said, well, you know, don't you? She's told you. I was like, actually, no, she hasn't, you know. And it's so difficult, and it is difficult to talk about. But I think the thing is, we always think, there's plenty of time for that. There's plenty of time for that. But my brother got up one morning, age 28, and just died.
Yeah.
He'd never told anyone what he wanted. Why would you at 28?
Yeah. I mean, my dad was the same, to be fair. I mean, you know, he died in the February of this year. But on Christmas Day, you know, which is what, 6 weeks earlier, or whatever it is, he was putting the gazebo up outside because we were all round at my mum and dad's for Christmas dinner.
Yeah.
You know, and he looked a bit peaky, don't get me wrong, and he had this weird pain in his arm. But at that point, we didn't know how.
6 weeks later. Yeah.
No.
That's what I mean.
Crazy.
You know, and I think if just one person will go out and have that conversation with their loved ones so that they know, because what it does, it provides clarity. So we don't get people sat in front of us going, I don't know what my dad wanted, never even thought about it. And when you're grieving, when you've had a loss, the last thing you want to be doing is questioning whether you're making the right choices, you know.
Or trying to figure out what that right choice is.
Or, you know, music is another one. People say, oh, I don't really know about music. And then it's like, am I making the right choice? And it's extra pressure at a time when you don't need it, you know. And yeah, me and Joe will die on that hill. Tell someone what you want. You know, it's really important. I have a funeral wishes plan already done. So it's all typed up. If I was to die tomorrow, you know, my husband don't need to worry about it. It's all there what I want. Whether he agrees with it isn't a thing. But, you know, it's there. But we doesn't need to make any massive decisions. So it is important to talk about it. I don't know why people are scared of it. I don't know. It's a taboo. I think what happens is people think they've got plenty of time. And then when someone's diagnosed with a terminal illness, it's like, I can't really talk about that now. You know, and that just needs to go.
I mean, it's funny though. So, years earlier, my father-in-law passed away from cancer. Weirdly, a very similar sort of time period to my dad. So, but he got diagnosed just before Christmas, and then he died actually on the Mother's Day in the March. So it was a little bit longer, but you know, same sort of thing. And you know, he had a humor about him in terms of what he wanted and what he chose. You know, he had this very specific thing that anybody that came to see him whilst he was ill was invited to the funeral, but anybody that didn't wasn't.
Amazing.
And it was because, you know, in his mind, it was like, well, if you're not going to come and see me now, why are you going to come see me once I'm dead?
Yeah. And I had a little bit of a thing like that with my mum, because if you remember me saying my mum had a stroke and she developed dementia. So I looked after her for 2.5 years, and it was difficult. It's very difficult to look after someone with dementia. And I remember when my mum passed away, I was very strict about no flowers.
Right.
And someone said to me, why don't you want flowers? And I said, well, I should have sent them when my mum was alive. You know, so the only flowers my mum had was the ones that I had, you know, a coffin topper and such. But I was very strict about no flowers. So yeah, I mean, things like that, important. That
and that was his thing. And right at the end of his funeral, just so he wanted the curtains to close. My dad wasn't bothered. I think me, my mum, and my sister decided that we were going to keep them open. But Michael, my father-in-law, he wanted them to close. But what he wanted was, as they were closing, you know, the is it the pig thing, or That's All Folks?
Oh yeah.
He wanted that played. So basically the curtains were closing and that was playing. So at the end of his funeral, when everybody was still a bit teary and stuff like that, nobody else knew. There was only like a select few that knew that was going to happen, and that happened. And literally the chapel just burst into laughter because it was just very, very fun.
So important. You know, music choices are so important. So we normally recommend families choose 3 pieces: one for entry, one for reflection, one for coming out of the chapel. And we always say the one for coming out of the chapel should be a little bit more upbeat, you know. But we've had some amazing music choices for people. You know, we've had Everybody's Kung Fu Fighting. If that song is personal and means something to the person, then it just makes it even better. You know. So we say to people, choose a song that really means something. And you get some people saying, "Oh, you can't have that, it's not appropriate." Absolutely, you can.
Anything's appropriate.
It's about what's appropriate to the person, you know. And I did a funeral in in February for my husband's best friend. And it was one of the most unique funerals that we've ever done. It was a black coffin. It was engraved with Mick the Mod. We had scooters there. And I remember his daughter saying, oh, I don't know if that's the right song.
Yeah.
It's about your dad. And that was one of your dad's favourite songs. And the celebrant stood up there and he was effing and he was jeffing. And the lady stood there at the back and she said, well, that's not appropriate, is it? Well, actually it is, because if you knew him, you knew that every other word was effing this and effing that. So it was very appropriate to the person that we was there to honour. That would not be appropriate for little 92-year-old.
No.
Of course it wouldn't. But it's about making sure that that funeral is personalised to the person that we're there for. And, you know, like I said before, there's no rules. There's no laws.
Yeah.
So, yes, the crematorium might say, no, you can't do that. But generally, they are very accepting of any ideas that you go to. You go with.
No, that's good. Yeah, I remember when I was doing the reading, for me, I was telling the story and I was like, my dad swore at that point, and I was like, am I allowed to stand up and swear at the same time? And they were like, well, if that's what he said, then yeah, of course you are, yeah. So yeah, so I did.
Yeah. Like I say, it's not appropriate for everyone. Of course it's not. But a funeral should be unique to that person.
Yeah.
You know, a funeral it's a lifetime in a day, and you only get the chance to tell that story once.
Yeah.
So it's really important that it's done properly. And it's really important that people don't leave that church or that crematorium and go, who were they talking about? Because I've done that. I've been to loads of funerals where I've come away and gone, I don't recognise that person they were talking about, because it's not true to the person. So another example of that, my mum was hard work. She would cause trouble in an empty house. She'd argue with people. And I wanted to make sure that the celebrant acknowledged that. And he did, in a really nice way. You know, he talked about how fiercely loyal she was. Really nice way of saying that. She just kicked off with everybody, you know. But I didn't want people to come away from that and go, well, that's a load of rubbish. She wasn't really like that, because it's so important that it's a true reflection of the person. And, you know, we have families that come to us. And another thing, we never say to someone, I'm sorry for your loss. Because, one, it wouldn't be genuine in the nicest possible way. If it's someone I know personally, of course I'll say that. But I've had someone turn around to me and say, well, why are you sorry? I'm not. Didn't even like him. So you have to be so careful, and you have to follow the family's lead with things like that. Obviously, if it's someone I know personally, we've done a lot of funerals for people that me and Joe know personally. Obviously, we'll say, I'm so sorry to hear that. But you have to take your lead from your family, because sometimes we do deal with families that this is just, right, they've died, I need to do the funeral. Because maybe there was family dynamics in there, you know, that they didn't, maybe there was estranged with, you never know with a family until they come in and speak to you. So there's lots of things to consider as well there.
Okay. And so what's your goal for the next 5 years for your business?
Every year me and Joe have like a strategy meeting of what our goals are. So obviously it's to continue with what we do, offering a really good value for money service that we offer. Unique funerals, that's what we offer. Support, we offer support to people if they want to plan it, because again, there's no rules saying that you have to have a funeral director. So, you know, if someone wanted to organise a funeral for their loved one, we would support them to do that on a consultancy sort of service basis. I would like to open another branch at some point within the next 5 years. Not too sure on what location that would be in. I would like us to be well known for providing amazing funeral services at value for money, you know, because no one likes to talk about money around funerals, because you think, oh, well, if I talk about how much it's going to cost, you know, and if I ask if it's going to be too expensive or too cheap, you know, there's that. Did I love my mum enough that I want to pay more? See what I mean? So people don't like talking about the cost, but we are very cheap in comparison to other services, especially you know, the corporates. And we will work with someone's budget as well, you know. Baby funerals, for example, we don't charge any professional fees. Now, that's not unusual. Most funeral directors don't. So most funeral directors will not charge for a funeral for anyone under the age of 18. And the actual cost of the burial or the cremation can be claimed back. So just getting more well known for the services that we offer alongside the at-need funerals. So things like, if you want to put your affairs in order, if you want to do some planning we can do that. I trained as a before I go end of life planning facilitator, so I can sit with someone and help them to create a binder with everything in, and then they can just put it away. And then when something happens, the family can pull it out. So things like that, getting people more comfortable talking around death is one of our biggest aims. But just to grow as well, but not grow massively big. I think 2 branches within the next 5 years would be a really good goal for us.
Well, I genuinely hope that you get that.
Thank you.
But you touched on something there, just quickly, in terms of the planning and what have you. Yeah. So I've tried to do that with my business because, and I'm sure you might have dealt with it in the stress of a probate property and things like that.
Yeah.
And I had this conversation with a lady called Jo that works at the hospice. And I went in on a chat with her. And what I want to try and do, and it, again, is because people don't necessarily like to talk about death, but when I get given a probate property from a solicitor or something like that, most of the time they've absolutely no idea what they're doing. And the problem is that they don't think about the asset that they've got, you know, during that end of life plan. They don't think about that asset, and it's just left then. And then, you know, the exchequer of the will's got to deal with it, or whatever it may be, and it just becomes a real problem.
And
whereas,
it's
stress that isn't needed. And it's like, what I'm trying to do is get in there before that happens and have that as part of that end of life plan or that end of life care, because then we can put that ball in motion, you know, ready for that to happen. Because otherwise it gets sat with a solicitor has to deal with it, but it's not the solicitor that goes into the house. It's not the solicitor that has to deal with the family as personally as I do, because it's me or one of the agents that work for me that go into the house and that essentially not pull it apart, but tell them what they need to do to, you know, get the best value out of it or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is, as being part of a community-based estate agent, is get in there early enough to be able to have that connection and have that relationship with that person before they unfortunately pass away.
Yeah.
Just to try and do it as a little bit of a unique way, rather than have to deal with it afterwards. Get your ducks in the row beforehand when you know that this is happening, and it'll just make your family's life so much easier afterwards. Exactly the same way as what you're mentioning there about having that end of life and that plan, so that it just takes and eliminates all that stress. We already have enough stress in life now,
Absolutely.
you know, with everything else that's going on, and then with the stress of having to figure out how much that's going to cost. Just get everything in.
And there's things like that and lots of other things that people don't even think about when it comes to planning, you know, end of life planning. I mean, I'm 46 this year. My end of life plan is done. Do I need it done this early? No, but you just never know what's going to happen. And I think the thing with probate as well is if you've got someone that's going through probate and they need to sell their mum and dad's house, that is another loss that they have to process on top of the loss, because that might have been their childhood home, you know, all of that. It's a difficult situation to be in your job, because obviously that person is trying to process not only the loss of the parents, but also now they're losing this family home, etc. But there's things like online banking. If I was to die tomorrow, would my husband know how to get into my online banking? No. That's why it's in my folder. You know, would he know what my life insurance is with? No, so it's in my folder. Would he know who my accountant for my business is? Yeah, because he has the same accountant for his. Does he know his phone number? No, so it's in the folder, you know. And it's not because we think that our partners aren't able to deal with stuff. It's because in that absolute time of grief, everything just goes out of your mind.
Yeah.
And you don't realise the things. Would my husband know who my mobile contract's with? No. You know, things like that, things that you don't talk about on the day to day. He literally wouldn't have a clue. He wouldn't know how to take over my business or anything. So it's about being prepared.
Yeah, but a lot of that, like what you've just mentioned there, like your online banking and your phone contracts and stuff, none of that existed 25 years ago as well. So
my husband wouldn't even know how to get my mobile phone because he doesn't know the PIN for it. You know, so how is he going to ring people to tell them they've died? Just as simple as things like that. Or if I had the fingerprint, he'd never get into it. So it's thinking about things like that. And this happened with my friend Mandy. Her partner said to me, "You don't know Mandy's code for a phone, do you?" No. He'd been with her 31 years, never knew it.
No.
You know.
I mean, my wife's the same, so I think every now and again she'll remember. So I have a pattern.
Yeah.
And and she'll do the pattern. I was like, it's not that, Beck. It's never been that. What is it? And then I've shown her a pattern. Oh, right, okay. And then she might remember it for a couple of weeks, and then that'll be it. Then she can't remember it again.
But in actual time of grief,
there's no chance. Yeah, there's no chance.
And it's about being prepared. And
then if it's written down for
it's
you,
about being prepared. It's about being, it's not about being morbid. No. Absolutely not. If anything, it's giving your family peace of mind. It's giving you peace of mind.
Yeah.
And someone said to me a few years ago, once you've sorted out all your dying, you can get busy living.
Yeah.
And that's very true. Now, don't get me wrong. You'd have to go back and you'd have to do a review once a year. Things change. Your passwords might change, things like that. But 10 minutes of a review once a year to make sure your stuff's up to date. It's nothing, is it? And you've just got that peace of mind then. Because like I say, you wouldn't believe how many families come in and go, I don't know, never talked about this. We thought we had more time, And the truth is, you don't know how much time you've got.
No, you don't. No, you don't. And that has hit home to me, certainly this year. So, yes. So in terms of the funeral services that you provide, is there anything that we've missed? Is there anything that you want to add? Is there anything that we've missed that you want to discuss?
No, I don't think so. I think it's about realising that there is no sort of one size fits all. If you've got something that you want to do, discuss it with your funeral director.
It's very bespoke, right? You
absolutely.
I mean, fit their needs.
We do, and not every funeral director will do that. But if there's something that you want to know if it's possible, ask, because generally, it probably is.
Yeah.
I mean, like I say, there's some fantastic funeral services out there that do what we would class as out there funerals, but actually they're not out there. It's just that they are bespoke. A few years ago, everyone thought natural burial grounds were a bit out there. They're common now.
Right.
So just ask. Me and Joe would always go out of our way to try and accommodate. And like I say, you can literally have a funeral wherever you want as long as the people agree with it.
Yeah.
So just ask and see what's available. Don't feel like you have to go down the crematorium route or the church route, because that doesn't fit everybody. And if you are going to go down the crematorium route, or a church route, there's still ways that service can be personalised. And I think in terms of grief, the hardest thing that I ever had after all of my family funerals was the funeral's done. Someone passes away. People are inboxing you, they're ringing you. If you need anything, you know where I am. They come to the funeral. I'm so sorry for your loss. The day after the funeral, they all go back to their normal life. Life carries on for them. Whereas when you're the person that's lost someone, that's not the case. So you have all these things like, time heals. It's all rubbish. It doesn't. My brother died 15 years ago. I'm still as affected by that now as I was 15 years ago. Time is not a healer. What happens is you learn to live around grief.
Yeah.
It just becomes, you don't get back to normal. You just learn to live in a different way. And we supported a lady with her husband's funeral. She's been together with him for a long time. And I've never seen someone so broken. Her soulmate gone. And I said this to her the other day. She was like, I just want to get back to normal. And I was like, you're never going to get back to normal.
No.
It's never going to be normal. And that's okay. You're just going to learn a different way of living.
Yeah, it's just a new normal, isn't it? I'm going through that with my mum at the moment. My mum's really struggling. More than what, and I know she'll watch these podcasts that I've been doing. She's very proud of me that I've been doing these podcasts. But she's struggling more than perhaps I may have thought she would.
Yeah.
But my mum and dad were together for such a long time. It's literally all she's known.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart that I see her that way. And I spoke to her a couple of weeks ago, and she said to me that she's just walking around the house. I'm like, what are you doing? She says, don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just walking around.
My mum was the same. My mum and dad were together for a very long time. And I remember being sat in the room when they told us that my dad had died, and a part of my mum died that day as well. And my mum summed it up really well when my Auntie Elaine died. She said, I lost my left arm when your Auntie Elaine died, but now I've lost my right arm. Now your dad's died. And, at the time I didn't really understand it, but obviously I do now. But grief is very personal. It's a journey, and the first funeral that me and Joe did was for my cousin's son, who died very suddenly at 25. And I still check in with my cousin now, not as often as I used to, but I still check in and say, how are you doing? Because I know that certain dates, anniversaries, all of that, it just flags it all up again.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's going to be all those firsts. And I think, it's also strange though, because it's like my mum's stayed at our house now more than she's ever stayed before, which is not, obviously it's not great because my dad's not here, but in a selfish way, I'd like to spend a little bit more time with my mum. Like, she's coming, so we're going to Abersock next week, just for a couple of days. My little boy's doing a run there, and my mum's coming with me.
Yeah,
She's coming with us for a few days, staying in a caravan, and it's like it sounds horrible, but if my dad was still here, she wouldn't have come.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? But so I suppose the silver lining, if there is such a thing, is that I'm actually getting to spend a little bit more time with my mum, and my kids get to spend a little bit more time with the grandma as well. So
makes you realise, doesn't it, what's important when you lose someone?
Yeah.
It really does make you realise. When Mandy died, my best friend, it made me reevaluate a lot of things in my life. She was only a few years older than me, and it made me sort of reevaluate certain aspects of my life and make changes.
100%.
And I think that's what loss does. But yeah, I think if I was going to say anything, get your wishes written down.
Yeah.
You can either do that on your own, or we offer a free service where you can come in, we'll document it all for you. You can take it away. You're not tied to use us as a funeral director, but at least it's written down. We also offer some courses where you can get your affairs in order, relatively cheap. I think it's £49 for a 90-minute course on how to get everything together.
Cool.
Invest in something like that so that you're prepared, your family's prepared, and then you don't have to think about it again. Once it's done, you don't have to think about it again.
Brilliant. So for people that are listening and not watching, we will put your socials and contact details in the descriptions.
Amazing.
But if it's just someone that's listening, how can they get to you on socials?
So they can find us on Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah.
They can also follow my life as a funeral director on TikTok.
Okay.
They can go to our website, which is www.elitefuneralservices.co.uk.
Yeah.
Or you can call us on 0161 669 1166.
Sam, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me.
And all your contact details will be in the descriptions.
Amazing.
Thank you.